Hi, everyone. I think we're just waiting on a few people, so we'll just give them a few minutes and then we'll get started.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I think we're waiting on two more people, but we have quorum, so for the meantime, I think we can get started, if that is cool.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 12:34. And before we get started, I just want to respectfully acknowledge that the SFSS is located on the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Katzie nations. Unceded means that these territories have never been handed over, sold, or given up by these nations, and we are currently situated on occupied territories. And I also just want to acknowledge, too, that many of us are on this video call from many different parts of the Lower Mainland, or some of you might even be out of the country. So just keeping in mind the lands in which we are fortunate enough to work on today. So roll call of attendance. Right now we have everyone except Simran and Ryan. Other than that, everyone else is in attendance. Just before we get started, I just want to, because we're all kind of new to doing this online video conferencing stuff, to make it easier, just keep your mic muted at all times unless you want to respond to discussion, just to minimize any echoing, just to make that a bit easier for us. If you want to move or second a motion, just clearly say out loud, I will move, and unmute your mic when you do that, or I second. And also just try to avoid talking over people if possible, because it does get a bit hard to follow over video conferences if people are talking over each other. So that's that. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Be it resolved to adopt the agenda as presented. Can somebody move that motion?
I will move.
Zaina moves. Can someone second that motion?
I can second.
Tristan seconds. Anyone have anything to add to the agenda? Cool. I don't think this is going to be a very long meeting. Just a few things to talk about. Probably should take half an hour or so, because I know we probably all have some schoolwork to do. So all those in favor of the motion? And I guess to make this easier, I'll just assume you're all in favor. If you're against or you're abstaining, just clearly indicate that you're doing so. So that motion is carried. So moving on to new business. Recommendations to council regarding the fall kickoff audit options. And I apologize if there's noise in the background. I'm having some work done on one of my bathrooms, and unfortunately I can't really get away from the noise. So be it resolved that the Council Governance Committee recommend to the Council to submit a request to the Board of Directors to conduct an X audit on the fall kickoff 2019. Can somebody move that motion?
I can move.
Tristan moves. Can somebody second?
I'll second.
Zaina seconds. So I bring this to the Council Governance Committee. Well, firstly, I just want to say I am aware that this is probably not the top concern of council or board, considering the circumstances, but this is still something that needs to be addressed. Following the presentation by MNP regarding audit options at the joint session of board and council, since then, I don't think board nor council has discussed further if any of those options that were presented should be pursued. Many members of this committee, I believe, were in attendance, including myself. Tristan and Simran were there. I don't remember if Serena, if you were there, but I brought. I think someone's trying to join the call. Hold on a moment. Hello?
Hey.
Okay, cool. We got Ryan. So Ryan, just real quick, just to keep echo at a minimum, just mute your mic at all times unless you want to respond to me.
Yeah, I've got an audio set up, don't worry.
Cool, that sounds good. So anyway, I brought this to the committee because the role of this committee is to bring agenda items and motions to council in the form of recommendations. And as a committee, we can make a recommendation to council on which audit option we think is the best for the board to pursue. And I spoke to Giovanni, and he and myself would like to see council make a recommendation to the board on which option they should pursue for this audit, mainly because the vast majority of board members were actually absent during the presentation at that joint session. It was prevalently counselors in attendance. So I think using what we learned at that presentation, it's important that we make a recommendation to council on what they should be recommending to the board to pursue for audit options. So I'm just going to go over really quickly the options that we do have using the information that I had from the board minutes during that presentation and the PowerPoint slides that were provided to us from the presenters. So we have three options: the financial statement audit, the internal audit, and the forensic audit. The financial statement audit, it was clear that the presenters mentioned that this might not achieve the objective of an audit that we want on the kickoff. It's very limited in scope and probably isn't our best option. Internal audit, however, it's not as limited in scope and breadth. Actually, it's very, the board gets to decide the scope and breadth of the audit. It looks at, the oversight and the governance structures around the event. And if over the course of the internal audit, evidence of wrongdoing appears, that's when they can move to a forensic audit if it were necessary. It's also much quicker than a forensic audit. And then the third option, obviously, is forensic audit, and that looks at everything. The main thing, though, is it doesn't provide recommendations. It's more involved with courts and lawyers, and is very, they mentioned, reputationally impacting the SFSS. So I wanted to bring this to this committee so we can make a recommendation on which of the three options councillor should be recommending to the board. And I wanted to open the floor to any suggestions. Oh, Excellent. So personally, I believe that an internal audit is probably the best, considering its flexibility and scope, and it looks what went wrong and can be easily escalated to a forensic audit if the evidence of wrongdoing arises. And I know originally many students were advocating for a forensic audit, but I think that the information that we've learned, it would probably be worthwhile for the society to undergo an internal audit on the kickoff, as opposed to jumping directly to a forensic audit when, in all honesty, there really isn't any evidence of wrongdoing in the current state, but there might be evidence that arises if we do go forward with an internal audit. Does anyone have any comments on that?
No, that's probably how I was leaning initially. And yeah, and like you said, like if things do end up turning out, something seems sketchy, then yeah, there can still be the possibility of a forensic audit anyways. So the internal one seems best, especially because it does give future recommendations. Which, I mean, it seems like when this was brought forward, that was, one of the biggest concerns was like, how do we prevent this from ever happening again?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, at least from what I gathered, aside from how, kind of biased it seemed during the presentation, it still seemed like that was probably the best option for everyone.
Yeah.
I actually agree too. I think that for now it's best to do an internal because the whole point of the audit was to like figure out where the money went, and because internal already covers all of that, I think internal is probably like the best option.
I was thinking a little bit on the same lines, primarily because if we directly were to go to a forensic audit, and nothing major comes up or nothing substantial comes out of it, we have to explain our expenditure on that as well. So if we have a more cost-effective option, it makes more sense to go with that first.
So in the same line of thinking that one audit would be more cost-effective than the other, because I know in the presentation, it was posed very much as there's the useless option, there's the expensive bad option, and there's the cheaper good option. Is the recommendation to not have an audit on the table?
The recommendation is on which option we should pursue.
Can we recommend to not pursue any, is kind of what I'm asking.
We can.
Because I know they did give us, I mean, they were like loose ballparks, but it would still be, I think I wrote down yeah, $30,000 or $35,000 for the internal audit, which is still a very steep sum to spend on something that we should have all the information on, right?
Yeah, I suppose. Does anyone want to add anything to that comment?
From what I understood from the peak and students that I work with in FAST, they're more concerned about where that money went, and I think they want more transparency. And I think that as council members, we should kind of put pressure on the board to do that, especially because the board is like the giant student union, and our job as council is to continue working with the board and having good communication between students and the board. So if students are asking for like figuring out where that money went, because it's a large amount of money, I think how much was it, like $100,000?
106,000.
Holy crap. Yeah, that amount of money, like they want to know where it went. So I think an audit is like justified in this circumstance, and I think that council should be holding the board accountable.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, what we can do, what we're doing today is this committee, if the majority of this committee decides that they want to recommend to council to do one of the three audit options, then a motion will be brought to council, and then council will have to decide if that option that we recommended to them, if we really want the board to do that. So, for example, like I think the majority of us here probably would like to see an internal audit done. So what we can do is this committee can recommend to council to do an internal audit, and then at our next council meeting, the entirety of council can have a discussion as toward whether the internal audit is the best option to do, or if it's worthwhile at all. Ryan, to answer your question.
Okay, that makes more sense. Because I know a lot of students, they're looking for the transparency. The Peak published the article, and everyone's asking where'd the money go, but the suggestion to spend more money immediately turns off SFU students.
Yeah, I definitely recognize that. Yeah, does anyone want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's the thing. Like, if that transparency and the answers we were seeking were able to be provided without an audit, that would obviously be, like ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it seems like we're in this spot because that's not the case, and that doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And it's really, I think, kind of to just repeat what I had said earlier, like the biggest thing is, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? And if this isn't kind of like really out in the open, no one's really going to know how, especially just with the fact that we have a board now transitioning out and a new one coming in, and it's like there's no real concrete steps in place, even from a financial perspective, because it might not even be about foul play, but just like how do we kind of streamline the process so like moving forward that this kind of stuff doesn't repeat itself.
Cool. Does anyone have any other discussion on that? Okay, cool. So to make this recommendation, I am going to move to amend the motion to replace X with internal audit, or I suppose just internal. So I will be moving to replace X with internal. Can somebody second that amendment?
I'll second.
Tristan seconds. Any final discussion on that amendment? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the amendment, and for those who joined before the beginning of the meeting, I just mentioned that maybe to make this easier, if you're in favor of a motion, I'm just going to assume you're in favor of the motion, and if you would like to vote against or you would like to abstain, just make sure you clearly indicate so So I'm not assuming that you are in favor. So all those in favor? Okay, amendment carried. Back to the main motion.
Wait, where are we voting?
I'm sorry.
Where are we voting?
Just if you would like, if you're voting in favor of the motion, just remain silent. If you're voting against, just clearly say, like, unmute your mic and say, I vote against or I abstain.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. So back to the main motion. Be it resolved that the Council Governance Committee recommend to Council to submit a request to the Board of Directors to conduct an internal audit of the Fall Kickoff 2019. All those in favor of the motion? Carried. So moving to discussion items. 6.1, goals for the Council Administration Committee. I suppose that should say Council Governance Committee. However, so these committees, the 3 committees that were established by Council were established quite late. And, therefore, this is our very first Council Governance Committee meeting. And just to kind of recap, the goal of these committees was to streamline discussion among councillors and help Council do its work. And in particular, the Council Governance Committee was established to do some of the following, such as work on the development of council policies and governance structures, some of which we've already established, like namely in regards to the committees, as well as making recommendations to the board for changes on their own policies, bringing forward motions or other agenda items to the council for consideration. I kind of like to make the comparison. The Council Governance Committee is kind of akin to the board's executive committee, except we don't really have any extra power, like the executive committee does. We're just here as kind of a smaller body of councillors to make recommendations to council on what motions and agenda items they should be considering. Other things such as making recommendations to council on how to use their budget. And just as a sidebar, council actually still has a budget that has remained completely untouched for this year. If I'm not mistaken, I think we have around $5,000. So if anyone can think of any way to use that budget for we have a month until the council term ends. So just, I'm putting that out there for consideration. And one last thing that's in the terms of reference for the Council Governance Committee is providing semesterly reports to the board of the recommendations, any progress or any initiatives that the council has been working on. And so, as I mentioned, this unfortunately is the first and might be the last governance committee of this year, governance committee meeting of this year, just due to the unforeseen circumstances that have been occurring lately. Unless I or other members of this committee deem it otherwise to hold another meeting, I'm totally open to that. And we'll have to see what arises in the next month. My hope is that many of you are still continuing as council members and hopefully can continue to reinforce, the governance structures that were put in place this semester, which includes the committees. I know, Serena, you're the chair of the Council Oversight Committee. And again, I know it's quite late in the school year, but it's up to your discretion too if you choose to hold a meeting for that committee before the summer. And again, that's something maybe you and I can talk about too privately, just trying to trying to figure out how council is going to operate for the next month is going to be a bit interesting. I'm working closely with Giovanni too, trying to get his advice on how he's running board meetings and how their board committees are operating. So just in regard to the goals for the Council Governance Committee, so this committee, does anyone have any questions regarding our purpose or any ideas, comments, concerns? Cool.
I just wanted to add one thing.
Mhm.
I hopefully will be graduating in June. So this is my last term. As of now, we do not have a rep for Women's Center once I leave, because, well, collective hasn't been meeting because of everything. SFSS is shut down, so things are a little up in the air. Hopefully we'll have someone for the summer. That's all I got.
Okay, cool. Thanks for letting me know. I do have a discussion item later too about the what council is going to do during the summer.
Yeah.
But good luck to you in your graduation.
Well, there won't be one, but yay.
Yeah. So if there isn't any more discussion on this item, I'll move on to the next one, which is next week's council meeting and its format. So I'm going to call a council meeting later today for next week, which will happen on Wednesday, April the 8th. And I wanted to have at least one last council meeting before the end of the semester because our March meeting was kind of taken out because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But there's a few items that still need to be considered. For example, what we just voted on, we still need council to recommend an audit option to the board for the kickoff. And I would like to have some conversations around COVID-19, specifically things such as what the SFSS is doing in response to COVID-19. And I've talked to Giovanni, and he has offered to provide an update to council on what the board of directors and the executive committee have been doing in response to this pandemic, to help students out in this time. And also some discussions around, how student unions are doing in the face of this pandemic. How are they still operating? How are they holding their meetings? Are they holding online activities on social media for their members? So just how other unions can follow in the lead of unions who have found a way to operate in the midst of this crisis. So just putting it out there, if you have any suggestions for the agenda items to bring forward for that council meeting, please submit them for the deadline. I'll be calling the meeting probably right after we adjourn this meeting. I think this program, Google Meet, seems to work really well. I've been using it all week for a variety of other meetings. And the board will be using this program too, Google Hangouts, for their meeting later on today. So I think this is probably a good format to use for the council meeting next week, unless anyone else has any other recommendations on programs to use. I think it's fairly simple because through my council chair SFSS account, I can easily record meetings for the purposes of the administrative assistant to transcribe minutes. And sending out links to people is very simple. So if anyone has any suggestions or comments regarding that.
Just one concern I have is, I know the board is also using Google Meets, but moving from 6-person meetings to 30 or 40 people, assuming we'll have guest attendance, it's a little bit chaotic to just have people unmute, check if anyone else is speaking, and then speak. You might need to establish some system to decide who talks.
Yeah.
Or we could switch to the board system, which admittedly isn't ideal, of submitting talking points ahead of time.
Yeah, thank you. And I will need to think about ways to effectively streamline conversation on a Google Meets call with a council meeting of 30 to 40 people. A way, an effective way that I found, I don't know, I was listening in on the Senate meeting, the SFU Senate meeting on Monday, and what they did was anyone who wanted to talk would just go into the chat room and say, I would like to speak. And then the chair would then recognize them. So Ryan, say if you wanted to speak, you would go in the chat room and say, I would like to speak. And then myself, the chair, would say, I recognize Ryan to speak for, however long. So yeah, just I will think of ways, processes to effectively streamline discussion during meetings. And I think it should be fine as long as everyone is on the same page and we can effectively communicate those processes to council. Does anyone have anything to add on this discussion item? That's cool. Okay. Moving on to 6.3, plan for council during summer semester. So as I mentioned before, the council term is coming to a close real fast. All of our terms as councilors, including mine as chair, ends on April 30th, and the new term ends on May 1st. So I guess, how many of you on this committee are continuing in your position as council representative for your respective student unions or constituency groups? Just out of curiosity.
I will be for at least the summer. I know that at least with psych, it will be pretty difficult to hold any kind of elections, and the plan was to do so at the end of this month. Obviously, that didn't happen. So, yeah, we're hoping to hold elections like potentially beginning of September, just given that we couldn't even convene anything in person if we wanted to. So that being said, I'll probably be hanging on as a council rep for now.
Okay.
I think for my student union, I'll be council rep for the summer. I think we were gonna have an election soon, but we're just playing it by ear right now.
Cool. So I think what I'd just like to hear, because this, I haven't been on council previously to this year, and I just want to hear, from those of you who have been on council for, a year or two now, what has usually been your experience with council during the summer, and what are the usual procedures for summer? Like, is council usually active during the summer? When does the first meeting get called? How do chair elections work? Et cetera, et cetera.
I was council chair last year, but I had gone back home. So from what I remember, we didn't even convene meetings. Yeah, I don't think we did over the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as I've been in council, we usually don't really meet in summer. It's a very, very rare thing that we're called in.
Okay, good to know. Because personally, I wasn't sure. Oh, Serena, do you want to speak?
Oh, no, it's just the same thing. Usually there's just that introductory slideshow that no one really pays attention to, and that's about it.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious because I know, I don't really know how many student unions are actually active during the summer, and especially given the circumstances. I'm assuming we could probably expect many student unions will not be active and therefore probably will not have available council representatives. Yeah, I suppose, because our term ends on April 30th, there's only so much planning we can actually do. I believe the first meeting of the new term is always called by the president or the VP Student Life, who then oversees the election of the council chair. Yeah, okay. I was just curious. Because it's hard to tell personally because, in normal circumstances, I believe student unions are not usually active in the summer, and then therefore council representatives aren't available for council meetings. But then again, it's really hard to tell what's going to happen with the given circumstances, because I do know that many student unions, now that, they're all at home and they have, personally, my student union, the political science student union, is still continuing to have meetings over the summer over video conference, just because it's easier to do so. I don't know, we all kind of, our lives are, we are all kind of just living out of home, where, we work at home, we do school at home, and it's a lot easier to plan meetings because we have much more time. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen, and that might need to be a discussion that goes to council, because I think that the incoming president and VP Student Life should, be aware of what council might want to do over the summer, and if we still have plans to hold meetings and stuff like that. Because personally, I think that it's important that council still operates over the summer, just to act as that oversight over the new board that's incoming. Does anyone have anything to add to that discussion? All right.
Has there been any word of how active the board will be this summer? Because we're sort of not bound to, I guess, but.
Well, yeah, the board will, this is just me speculating, but the board will still have to operate, will still have to have meetings, and their meetings will be online. There's going to be, the society currently doesn't have any, the staff aren't working in person. They're all working from home via, online. So there is a huge reduction as to, or a huge limitation on what the board can actually do this summer, in terms of services and advocacy and things like that. But the board will definitely continue to be active. Yeah, I hope that answered your question. Okay, I'll move on to 6.4 then, and that's 2019-2020 Council Report. And I want to spearhead a project to create a 2019-2020 report of what Council has done this term. And basically, my vision for that is just a timeline of the major initiatives, the motions passed, and goals achieved from Council this year. And the purpose of this report would be to provide future councillors and council chairs with this information to reflect upon what this council has done, and when they take the reins, and also to provide the board with a semesterly report of the the Council Governance Committee, as outlined in its terms of reference, actually mentions providing a semesterly report to the board of the recommendations, the progress of council initiatives during the term. So that is something I wanted to spearhead, and some things that could be included in that report, notably initiatives such as at the beginning of the year recommending the pro-choice policy to the board, and having that inevitably passed at the board table. Things like the subspace condemnation, things like the subspace referendum, the council policies that were established, and the newly established council committees. And that could include things like recommendations on how the committee should operate in the future, how we envision it happening in the future, just kind of give that advice to future council members. My question is, would anyone be willing to work on this project alongside me, or even just contribute a section of that report? Like, I know Simran and Tristan, you were, big motivators of the pro-choice policy at the council table. So that might be a part of the report that you might want to help out with, and anyone here can help out with certain sections, or be a project lead with me. I'll open up discussion.
I can help with a section. I'm not sure which one yet, but I can help with probably at least one at my current capacity.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And even if you don't want to, the other committee members, even if you don't want to be a active, play an active role in the making of this report, which I'm not expecting to be a huge workload, I might still reach out to you on certain initiatives that you might have been a part of, and I just want your opinion on things that can be put into that report. Any further discussion? Okay, cool. So that's the end of our discussion items. And just like that, we reach adjournment. So be it resolved to adjourn the meeting at 1:10 p.m. Can somebody move that motion?
I'll move.
Ryan moves. Can someone second?
I can second.
Just a second. All those in favor? And carried. All right. Thanks everyone for making the time to come onto this call. I know we're all very busy with schoolwork and all the uncertain circumstances of today's current world. But thank you for making the time, and hopefully we'll chat soon. And I will be calling the council meeting right now.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Zaina.
Have a good day, folks. Bye.
Goodbye.